I'm Glenn Ray Loveall. I was a B-36 aircraft commander for about 7 years here back in the 50s. And the 7th Bomb Wing. I was in the 492nd, the 4017th, and the 9th Bomb Squadron. I've got about 3,500 hours in the B-36. But I was going to tell you that story on Cliff Shepherd. We were on that was actually the flight where Garrick had bailed his crew out over in England. When we went over to England, he had bailed his crew out. And coming back, we got into Goose Bay. Well, Cliff Shepherd was the lead, but some way we were coming over a fix, a radio fix here, and then you would turn to the right 90 degrees, go out and do a 180 and come back in. Well, some way I got ahead of Shepherd. And the GCA was talking to Shepherd and giving him instructions, but they were actually following me. But when I came over the fix there, well, they told Shepherd to turn 90 degrees right with this heading, but that was the normal heading we were all going to turn, so I turned. I wasn't listening. I didn't know that GCA was talking to Shepherd, but I turned 90 degrees to the right, and Shepherd turned 90 degrees to the right, but he's out here in the boonies someplace. And then I get to the end of that 2 minute pattern. I was turning back in. Well, GCA saw that. Well, that wasn't supposed to happen. So they told Shepherd, they gave him a gyro out approach, like his directional gyros were out. And actually, they were following me around, talking to him. And old Shepherd flew into that mountain. But he had brought the note. About 3 people got killed. On that particular flight, that maneuver, going to England and coming back, we lost 2 airplanes, one over going into England and one coming back up at Goose Bay. And Garrett, who took that one in England, bailed out, but then it was Christmas. The next Christmas, he hit the mountain down here in El Paso approach. So his end time was floating right behind him every place he went. And you're going to have Bill Manelli here. Bill Manelli was his flight engineer in England, but of course, Bill Manelli wasn't on the flight, but to El Paso. All the crew were killed in that flight. Okay, ask me a question.
You flew the B models? The B models before the jets?
Yeah. No. When I came here in 51, they already had the jet engine.
On the B model. Did you fly to Alaska?
I didn't fly to Alaska and land there, but I know that Alaska, where this airplane here.
Well, it's on the BC coast, but it was flying from Tylson to Carswell. Training mission.
Well, a friend of mine, I wasn't familiar with that thing, but a friend of mine was up there with that aircraft commander, and he was flying a B-36, and he came back, and of course what they were doing is that cold weather check on the carburetors, the engines, and what was happening, those carburetors were freezing up, and it was making the mixtures go rich. The mixture just kept getting richer and richer, and the engines were catching on fire coming out of the back. Well, that when it crashed, they didn't get control of it. Well, my friend didn't either. But he was close enough on the west coast to land to an airport. But he got his on the ground. He landed at an airport. But he had the same thing happen to him. If he had been where there wasn't an airport available, he'd have been bailing out too, because his engines were catching on fire just like the one that crashed it.
Yeah, I guess the problem was solved a bit later on, but not at the time. It caused a lot of redesign.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they did. They did take care of it.
New exhaust. I guess they went fuel injection.
I don't recall exactly what they did, but I do know they got it as a result of those the test that they were running up there. They did get a fix on it.
Yeah. Well, that was supposed to be the cause of the engine fires. And
Yeah.
ended up with 1, 3, and 5 out. And had to lighten her up and salvo and then point her south over probably a bit southeast, and then point out to sea afterwards. The crew bailed at that point. But after the crew bailed, the aircraft turned around in midair and came due north. And
Yeah, see, I didn't know. I don't know anything about that accident, really, very little. I didn't know that. I didn't know that the airplane kept flying.
well, in Barry's testimony, crash investigation, he was apparently still in the chute, coming down when the aircraft flew back over. And he apparently put the autopilot on to take it southwest out to sea. This would be heading close to north. As well, they were at about 5,000 feet of elevation apparently at that time, maybe a little less by then. And the aircraft would have had to raise where it finally rests now. It's about 200 miles north, and it would have actually had to fly over several 7,000 or 8,000 foot mountains. And it's at 6,000 feet elevation now. So the mystery is, how did it get there? You have to know something about flying craft. You can speculate it, which of course we don't, which is why we're asking you what it's like to fly one of these things.
It was an easy airplane to fly, but it was truly a crew airplane. I came to the B-36, the B-50s. That B-50, that was a pilot's airplane, and you could tangle with the F-51s or any of those people in that. It was very maneuverable. The 36, though, it was a crew airplane. It took a crew to fly it, and it was a wonderful airplane. It was really an easy airplane to fly, I thought. And we could get to altitudes that no one else could get to, and that was always a decent factor, that we didn't have to worry about fighters being up there or whatever. But you did have to worry. I guess I worried more in the fighter area was those, F-89 that had the rockets on them, and they wouldn't be up there with us. But they could come in below us and pitch up and fire their rockets from several thousand feet below us. That was really the only fighter that I worried about back in those days. However, I was on a test flight out of Carswell one day on a Saturday, and we were at 48,500 feet over Dallas. Here came a Navy jet. Came in from my right wing, got right in front of me, and went up and did several slow rolls. That was the first jet I had ever seen. It was like in the 100 series of the Air Forces. I don't know what this was, but it was a Navy jet. And after that, altitude wasn't our safety factor anymore. That's when we actually started going these low-level missions in the B-36. And that's an experience. That old thing is rocked in shape. When you get down there at low level, when they changed our tactics on bombing, well, the war mission, evil mission, it changed the procedures of the flew and going in.
There was a few things that came up talking earlier. We were talking about the autopilot. It was supposed to be put on autopilot, and this is what we've been talking about. And again, the commander put it on autopilot to fly southwest or south-southwest, and it turned in midair and came back over before it actually even hit the ground off the chute. There is some people have said that one of the co-pilots was in there and he had some difficulty with the chute and things, so he may have potentially turned the aircraft around and reset the autopilot and bailed at that point, because he would have been out over the ocean. It was an island, so the aircraft would have been south of the island. He would have had to turn around, bring it back in order to try and land. But the question is then, how does the autopilot raise the plane up over the mountains and fly for 200 miles by itself?
That I can understand. Well, actually, I can understand I don't know what engines were out on the airplane.
1, 3, and 5.
1, 3, 5. Okay, so there was actually 2 out on the left wing, and so I could see you could overpower your autopilot to a certain amount of force, but you could turn the airplane even when it was on autopilot. And it's conceivable with 2 engines on one side out. Well, actually, if you turn to the left, it would turn into the dead engine.
Counterclockwise turns.
Yeah. Now, I could understand a turn like that, and then I could actually understand the climb, because as the airplane gets lighter, and it probably was, I don't know how much lighter it was at that point, but it would probably be picking up a little airspeed. Well, your autopilot, when you had it set for an airspeed, a set airspeed and altitude. And if we did have altitude hold, now I don't know if they had altitude hold on that airplane, whether they had it on or not. But as the airplane got lighter and picked up speed, well, it would climb. But it kind of hold the speed over the altitude, unless they had the altitude hold switch on.
The point was made that the autopilot actually runs on barometric pressure to tell what elevation you're at. And if you're flying through storm cells into higher and lower pressure areas, that barometric pressure is, your distance from the ground is actually going to change. So it's possible that the plane grows in response to following that barometric pressure increase, and could have actually rose along with, particularly if the elevation hold was off, could have rose several thousand feet as it lost ice on the wings, which was another factor. And obviously the weight of the weapon was gone, the weight of the crew was gone. It's conceivable it could have gained enough elevation to get up, well, certainly did get over the mountains, didn't it?
Yeah. See, I wasn't familiar with all of this. I knew about the accident, but it was kind of hush-hush and everything at the time. There wasn't a whole lot of talking going on about it.
Well, it was the biggest weapon in the world at the time. That's by its very nature secret.
Then I guess it was Mark 6 weapon.
Mark 4.
Mark 4, okay, 46.
Yeah, it's an older one. It's still doing that.
But Mark 4. Yeah, the Fat Boy was the first one.
The Mark 3, I guess you could say.
I've forgotten the weights on it. They had different, bombs had different weights, but I don't remember.
10.5 or 11,000 pounds.
Like the Mark, I do remember the Mark 17 and the 24, 41,000 pounds. That was a lot of weight. When you put that weight on there, you knew you had some weight. And I dropped the shape of that Mark 17. And I was expecting out over the East Coast, out east of New York, out there, deepest part of the Atlantic. We went out there, we were getting rid of these shapes, the airplanes. We dropped that shape, and I thought the airplane was going to pitch up and everything else. We dropped that bomb. Of course, we did go into a turn because we wanted to see it hit. But the airplane, it didn't pitch up. There was no control problems on it whatsoever. It was just a nice, smooth turn.
On a 36?
On a 36. Now, maybe if I'd gone straight ahead and everything, I might have wanted to pitch up some. But since I did roll into a turn, but not a big turn, I just rolled in about a 30-degree bank turn, so I could see the bomb when it hit the water. As I say, it was an easy airplane to fly. It's a good, safe airplane.
It's too bad that there isn't one left that still flies. Too bad there isn't one left that still flies.
Oh, and that's true. And we almost had one. The Air Force wouldn't let us do that. This airplane we have out here at one time, we thought we were going to put it in flying condition. The Air Force said no.
I spent the morning looking at things out of there. You can look at all the pictures you want. So you actually stand in the craft, and you have no conception of how big it is, and yet in some corners inside how small it is too.
Yeah. Of course it was. Now it was a comfortable airplane over the truth. I've got a lot of sleeping hours on that B-36. You got those bunks in there. They weren't the best bunks in the world. More than once I've landed more rested than I was when I took off. Usually when we've had these USCMs, you'd be up 24 hours in advance, get the airplane and everything on it ready to go. And get off the ground.
What is a USCM?
A unit simulated mission. It's kind of like a combat mission. Unit simulated mission. Unit strike mission. Unit strike mission. I've actually forgotten what the S stands for. It's either simulated or strike, but it's for the whole wing, the wing effort type thing. Simulated going to war.
Unit simulated combat mission.
USCM. Unit simulated.
Did you fly any alert missions or ones that really stepped it up a notch to the point where they tested everybody?
Well, I've been on alert a lot of times, and I've rolled down the runway, and we had those different categories of alert. Ones where you'd actually go out and start up the engine, roll down the runway. But I never, on an alert mission, never made a takeoff. It's just the highest category I got in. You started engine and went rolling down the runway.
You never knew as a commander whether it was the real thing or whether it was a test to see whether you were ready for the real thing.
Well, it was really just to see if you were ready for the real thing and you could respond and get the airplane in position. And actually, you were rolling down the runway. And you were pretty well. I guess you could roll down the runway with one or two engines out. But you were observers watching, make sure that the airplanes and everything were in proper configuration and were ready to go to combat. And we were. That was one thing. I flew World War II and B-24s. And one thing that impressed me more in the B-36, well, World War II, there were a bunch of civilians really that got caught up and that taught us to fly and then went to war. But in the B-36, you had professional people in there. And you knew that when you took off, you were going to go and hit your target. I mean, it was just in there. World War II, you had guys boarding this way and that way every now and then. Well, you had a certain number that wouldn't get to the target. But those 36s, you knew that those guys in there, that they were going to go and they were going to hit their target. And that was really a motivational factor for me and a lot of others, to know that the guy out there on your wing, he's going to be there when you go over the target. And each one's going to do their part.
It was a tough time of life for everybody in the sense that you're all ready to go all of the time.
Yeah.
But you never knew whether you were actually going to go or not. But in that sense, too, it was one of the most successful weapons ever built, or weapon systems, including the managed plane and everything else, because it wasn't used, which means it was 100% successful. Which is an amazing thing in itself.
Really, the Cold War was one of the most important wars we fought. The Cold War. And we won it in that B-36. You just can't imagine the influence on the world government that B-36 had. We could do anything, more things than that, than any other nation. And they knew we could. There wasn't any nation that we couldn't reach in that B-36. And what we were carrying was sure a load. But I'm convinced it had more to do with world peace than any other factor. By factor, I'm talking about these different Monroe doctrines and all these doctrines and things we had. I still think that the B-36 being in the air had more to do with maintaining world peace. Because this period was a very volatile period. Man, Russia was going to expand, China was going to expand, and that B-36, I think, was the major weapon system that maintained world peace. The other airplanes, fighters, and everything contributed too, but I'm talking about the major factor.
That was
the B-36.
checkmate for everybody. There was no answer to that.
And old General May, he was really a good leader. I never met the man personally, but just the procedures and things he set out. There was just like, there was no quitting. You knew that you were going to go, and you knew you were going to have the support you needed, and it was just a good fighting force. Morale, determination, capability, everything wrapped together.